Hi, my name is Bala from Red Hat. Uh, I'm the TSC member and SIG Architecture Chair of Nephio, and today I'll be discussing more about uh, Nephio and Oran synergy. In the previous talk, Sana and myself gave a little bit of overview on this talk. We're going to give you a little bit in depth of what we are trying to do in Oran. So this was co-created between myself, Sagar Arora from OAI Foundation, and Joy Maloney from Ericsson. So, but I'll be presenting the deck today. So, so Nephio has three swim lanes as its main use cases. So one is the infrastructure orchestration, network function orchestration, and network function configuration. Uh, if you see the WG6 working group 6 of ORAN Alliance, I mean, ORAN has a lot of working groups. The cloudification orchestration group, which is WG6, also addresses the same use cases. The O2 IMS specifications has defined intent-based provisioning interface for clusters. Uh, and then the O2 DMS specifications has defined the Kubernetes native profile for network function deployment. It has one for HC and one for Kubernetes. Uh, and then the O1 interface in ORAN, it defines the network function configuration predominantly using netconfig, etc. So if you see, these are the these are the subset of use cases in ORAN, but these are the main use cases in Nephio. So uh, Nephio wants to be aligned with the other industry standard open source projects and standard bodies, such as ORAN and 3GPP, and hence we want to adopt and implement these standards in the relevant areas. Uh, so some of the main ORAN integration objectives in Nephio projects are realize the domain split between SMO and O-Cloud functions with distinct Nephio management cluster. I'll explain that in a bit in the next slide. Uh, So basically, we want to do the O2 and DMS thing with the NF orchestration using SMO. So NF orchestration, there is a component called NFO in SMO, which is responsible for orchestrating network functions, which is defined by the O2 DMS interface in the ORAN specifications. And we would like to do the same thing in Nephio on that. And then we had to, the O-Cloud registration is another objective. If a Nephio management cluster is acting as a O-Cloud and another Nephio management is acting like a SMO, we need to ensure the O-Cloud registration happens with the SMO. And after that, the rest of the orchestration functionality, such as the infrastructure orchestration and the network function orchestration, can take place. And the WG602 IMS group has defined an intent-based provisioning interface in ORAN, which is based off cluster templates. Basically, it is the definition of provisioning interface in an O2 IMS team is via templates. So there is a standard REST API where you define the intent, but your rest of the configurations and your intent is defined in the cluster template, which is hosted in the cloud. And the SMO picks a cluster template, uh, and then it provides the parameters for the template, and then it expresses its intent of creating a cluster. So that is what defined in the ORAN Alliance group, and Nephio has an implementation of that. On the O2 DMS side, which is responsible for the function, sorry, there is a let's type here. Sorry. Yeah. So on the O2 DMS interface, which is responsible for orchestrating network functions, we want to take the OAI workloads, the CU, CP, and DU simulated RF inside the DU, and then we want to orchestrate them on the O-Cloud. So essentially, the Nephio management cluster, which is acting like an SMO, will orchestrate these functional workloads onto the Nephio management clusters, which is acting like a O-Cloud. And hence we want to satisfy the O2DMS interface specification specified by the OR. The other workload that we want to orchestrate is the near real-time RIC from OSC. So in the previous talk, we talked about the synergies between different various projects so that Nephio has. We have a synergy with ORAN SC, Silva, etc. And if you see here, you can see a lot of those synergies, how we are integrating with OAI, OSC, etc. So, and then the WG5 requirements for service assurance is also one of the use cases for Nephio, which we are investigating. The last point is investigate how to realize the O1 interface that can use or coexist with Nephio enablers using netconf. So O1 interface defines the network configuration aspects, how a SMO can configure network functions, day 1, day 2, day 3 operations, any configuration that needs to happen, that is defined by our own interface netconf. We are investigating on that. So one fundamental principal difference is Nephio is a very Kubernetes native and cloud native orchestration software. So we want to do everything using cloud native principles. Whereas if you see netconf, it's from a principles perspective, it slightly differs how the netconf works versus the cloud native principles of Kubernetes using CRDs. So we are investigating interfacing with a project called KubeNet. That project will gives you a CRD facade for Kubernetes, and on the southbound side, it integrates with the network functions using netconf, etc. But on the northbound side, it gives a CRD facade. So we are integrating with that project to realize this use case of how to do the network configurations using cloud native principles, satisfying both the principles of Nephio and also the requirements of ORAN. So in the next slide, this is the ORAN integration architecture for Nephio. If you really see that the bottom two lanes here, this and this, essentially, if you see FOCOM and NFO, this is the SMO layer. So FOCOM and NFO are two of the major components in SMO. FOCOM is responsible for orchestrating and managing the infrastructure. NFO is responsible for orchestrating and managing the network functions. And there are other components like non-real-time REC, etc. But for the purposes of this discussion, these two are the main components. So these components, if you see here, there is a Nephio management cluster. So SMO Nephio management cluster. So there are in the Nephio implementation of this ORAN architecture, if you see, there are two management clusters. One management cluster is responsible for hosting the SMO functions, predominantly FOCOM and NFO. And they could actually reside in two separate clusters as well. And then there is a separate cluster for hosting the O-Cloud, which is the bottommost layer, if you see here. O-Cloud, Nephio management cluster, this for O-Cloud. This is where the IMS and DMS software lives. So that's where the IMS functionalities and DMS functionalities of the Nephio implementation lives. And then, so hence there'll be two separate clusters, one for managing the SMO functionalities and one for managing the IMS software. And DMS is actually, if you see the DMS interface, it's actually between the NFO and the workload clusters directly. So there can be a lot of workload clusters on your edge sites, especially, and a few in the regional sites. So so there'll be many workload clusters, and then NFO talks to them using the DMS interface, and there'll be one IMS cluster, which is responsible for creation of the infrastructure, and that integrates with FOCOM using the ORAN defined standards. So that's essentially how the architecture is realized. ORAN architecture is realized in Nephio. Uh, so we have defined a few user stories uh, along these lines. One is the network function orchestration using SMO. Uh, and then obviously there is in this deck there are references to the ORAN specifications documents, either GAP or specifications or document here. Uh, Essentially, we want to orchestrate using the NFO functionality. We want to orchestrate the ODU, OCU, CPU, OCU, UP, and the control plane and user plane workloads and XApps, and the near real-time read from OSC onto the O-Cloud side. And we have done many of this successfully already. So from the O2 DMS perspective, we can say Nephio is compliant with the ORAN specification. The second thing is the create O-Cloud Kubernetes cluster. So we want to, like I said a few minutes ago, ORAN has defined a cluster template approach with a cluster template approach with the declarative principles for creating Kubernetes clusters for hosting RAN workloads. Uh, there are specifications defined, and then Nephio has adopted those principles, and then uh, 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 we have an implementation of that already. And the O-Cloud registration is like I said, O-Cloud has to register with an SMO uh, in order for it to be managed via SMO. So that's another use case and the user story that we have defined. So today, if you see the implementations of his, Nephio has some implementations for O2 IMS provisioning interface. Nephio has O2 IMS provisioning interface for the O-Cloud as well as for FOCOM. So like I said in the previous diagram, let me just go to the previous diagram just to touch base. Here, if you see here, there are two separate management clusters, two separate softwares running, one on the SMO Nephio management cluster and one on the O-Cloud Nephio management cluster. The FOCOM software runs on the SMO Nephio management cluster, and the IMS software runs on the O-Cloud management cluster. So for us to realize the end-to-end use case, we need to have a both provisioning use case, provisioning clusters use case. We need to have a FOCOM component and we need to have a O-Cloud component. That's what we explained here. We have a O2 IMS provisioning interface for the O-Cloud and also FOCOM, and we have it today in Nephio. And then, like I said, Nephio in general compliant with the O2 DMS interface, which is responsible for managing the workloads and orchestrating the workload. And like I said, Nephio is envisioning how to support the own interface in a cloud native way. This is where we are integrating with other projects such as Kubernetes to realize the use cases. So that's essentially the crux of the ORAN synergy with Nephio. Again, I want to emphasize one point. ORAN is a large industry group with a lot of specifications. There are at least 10, 11 working groups. So we are focusing on a few working groups like working group 10, working group 6. Even within those, working group 6, for example, or even working group 6 has a lot of specifications for every management aspect of an O-Cloud. So we are not looking at everything that the WG6 defines. We are only focused on the use cases that Nephio is interested in. For example, let me go back to the very first slide. Our use cases are, these three are our main use cases: infrastructure orchestration, network function orchestration, network function configurations. In these functional areas, anything that is defined by industry bodies such as ORAN or 3GPP, we would like to pick it up and we would like to implement that as a standard implementation in Nephio to ensure we are in line with the industry standards. And hence, once we are in line with the industry standards, that will help us and help not only Nephio, it will also help the overall ecosystem. It is also easier for adoption by the different stakeholders. So that's essentially the crux of it. And then these are the meeting details. We have we have a meeting, ORAN specific meeting in Nephio uh, every Wednesday, 10 a.m. Central Time, and 5 a.m. CET, Central European Time. And there's a Zoom link and there's a track sheet. And we welcome you to join us, and it will be much appreciated. Thank you so much.